Welcome to part 6, everybody. Woo, sorry about the delay on that. Life was busy. So without further ado, let's hop in. So part 6, the Sirius wolves in our spiraling trees. This one's going to be very interesting. And first of all, miss me? So, my last presentation, the whole file got corrupted, and I had to deal with family members and gardening and life and all that. Yet I'm here to say that I'm actually kind of vibing with the delays at this point because it gives you more time to enjoy life and do the things you want to do instead of having to look at all the weirdness happening and whatnot. Since that's the focus of these presentations, it was kind of nice to have a few days off and kind of reflect. And I had a crazy amount of synchronicities, especially with this slide right here, putting it together with the Shactus after Shaq, which funnily enough has a 33 on it. Like, it's a very occult representation of Shaq. And that's him on the hot ones, making that face after he eats a spicy wing. And I made this slide that, I can't really deliver this perfectly. Sometimes I'm a little prickly, and I get the information's a bit spicy. Yet, I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. And the amount of synchronicities I had on this just in the last day or two is like, woo! The same face Shaq is making right there. And I wanted to take this point that for a year or two, I've been relating synchronicities to sinks, like your kitchen sink. Because I started spelling or abbreviating synchronicity as sync, but it sounds the same as sink. So it got me thinking about that. But a sink is also where you clean up your dishes. So it's a place of purification. And on top of that, I found out later on that there are these things called plant sinks. And it's about transporting sugar and energy from photosynthesis around to the parts of the plants that need it. So you can almost think of it earlier with the lemonade and adding your own sugar to it, that it's a reality itself is about moving around the sugar and that generative force where it needs to go to line up and make everything thrive, in my opinion anyway. And I just thought that was very interesting that, it keeps repeating itself. And Alice from Wonderland had to sink further down the rabbit hole on her journey of truth. And the last presentation I was talking about the hell divers, that they're okay with jumping feet first into hell because they know they're going to rise, that this can't stop them unless they purposely choose to identify and stay here on their own. And one of the biggest pre-programming games in the world right now is actually called Helldivers 2, which is about this whole idea of plummeting in the worst places possible so that you can save the rest of humanity, and especially the rest of humanity that doesn't want to have to be on the front line and have to deal with the enemy face to face like they do. And here's Shaq again. That when I say a lot of things, and especially with the last presentation, that it's easy for someone to hide behind excuses. That when I'm saying these things, I also mean them for myself, and I also know that they don't hold up all the time. Yet I think there have been times, and in the current scenarios of my life, I think I'm justified in saying some of these things. And that it's all about balance. That if I'm saying this or that, I can't hide behind any of it. Or I can, but I'm trying not to. But you have to find this balance or else you can't do anything. So you have to figure out how to move forward, but also do it with the right balance. And that kind of takes me back to this idea of baggage I keep talking about. Yet that it's not just baggage, that if you can't move beyond emotions because you feel bad about it, that's emotional mind control. You're letting that emotion control your destiny because you're too afraid to identify with it or overcome it. That you're too afraid to be afraid, or whatever that emotion might be that's keeping you from actually going further down the rabbit hole. And on the idea of feedback, that feedback's nice, but I'm mostly searching for the constructive criticism. And that I asked, let all the cannons open fire. Just don't be surprised if you get some back yourself. Yeah, that's the idea of a theory. And I'm more talking about my theory and not the presentation of it. Because I know there are problems with the presentation and this is a rough draft. Yet I'm moving forward with it anyway, and I would like the information to fine craft it, because any one person presenting a theory to reality needs reality to help him shape it, because I'm here to say this isn't completely correct. Yet I would ask you, how much of this would have to be correct for you to take it any level of seriousness? 5 or 10%? That's the way I look at it. And I know that's not a prevailing perception of reality, yet I'm here. And there are a million other videos out there of everything you're looking for. That nice gardening channel that never makes you feel bad, it's out there. That wonderful cooking channel that never talks about anything negative, it's out there. So if you want that, go find it. That's not what I am or who I am. That's a part of me, and I want to treasure and save that. Yet, as I'll go on to, that life has requirements and situations, and if you ignore them just to hide in your positivity, then that's not balance. So back to the criticism. Yeah, I'm trying to work on it, but if you could help me work on it, I would appreciate it. So taking feedback I got from someone in the last presentation, I wanted to talk more about the solutions. And I'll get to this more later, but I spent a lot of time gardening yesterday, and those are my raspberries and parsley. They're both coming in. I'm working on, getting rid of all the wild jungle. So this was a raised bed that I planted potatoes in, and I wanted to make a reference and side-by-side comparison to our reality, because I keep talking about this harvest. And here I am harvesting this raised bed to create a new system that I see fit. And I got to dig the whole thing up, get down in the trenches. All the plants are gone. All the root systems are messed up. This is a picture of a roly-poly that was walking around in the crumbled ashes of his previous home, as his friends and family are either dead and scattered everywhere. To me, it's just a gardening harvest. To him, it's a cyclical cataclysm that took pretty much everything he loved, and he was lucky to even survive. How many worms did I cut in half doing this? How much pain and suffering did I cause just to change the status quo and change it from a bunch of weeds to potatoes? And this was a little spider on the edge of the wood on the raised bed. If you're on the outside of it, if you're on the wooden part, you're fine. You're golden. If you moved all your stuff to the right spot before it happened, you're fine. You don't have to deal with it. You're just watching. You're not a part of it with front row seats as it's happening to you and everything you held precious and loved. So this is the person that gave me the inspiration to start these presentations. I got this big gardening pot synchronistically, pretty much literally yesterday, and it kind of made me smile that it kind of popped up right where it needed to. With the 1111 and the idea of a nursery on it. And to the same person, as I was doing this entire thing, I was having the bald eagles or the king of the Seahawks fly above chirping, teaching their young how to fly above the Puget Sound or the abyss in the trees. So I think that will mean something to you. So these are the potatoes I got from Babylon. So this idea coming up again and again that we take from Babylon everything and we turn it moral again, and for average people, and not just profit or slavery or making rich people richer so they can have diamond plated shower curtains in their yachts they don't share with anybody. And after I'm done and I water it down, it's very muddy and soupy. So you could see this as the idea of the mud flood and all that afterwards, it's all, the depressurization event sucks everything up, and then it falls back down, and it's all mucky and goopy, and, the sun's been 7 times as bright. And if you had a safe place to hide out as it was resetting and things could kind of regrow a bit before you had to go back out in the muck with all the giant monsters, that might be a really nice thing to consider and would probably be a lot better for your quality of life. Because imagine the roly-poly in that. If it'd just been outside of that the whole time, its odds, its experience would have been so much better. That's a broccoli stem I'm hoping grows back, but you have to take off all the dead wood to let the new stuff grow. So, and it's my opinion that there's a lot of dead wood around us right now. And this is to make natural fertilizer. So I take all the weeds that I pulled up from the harvest and I soak them in water for a few days in the sun, and all the tannins and nutrients will come out and will be the fuel for this new system. And this is the Tower of Silence, I believe in Burma, which is connected to Zoroastrianism. And they found a bunch of corpses here, and they let people stay out in the sun, and they rot, and all their fluids go into this giant pool in the center. And it's been linked to alien conspiracies that, higher beings could use our vital fluids to help them live longer. Just like I'm doing with plants and weeds in my garden. So it's funny to think about fractally. And I worked at McDonald's for 5 years, and there's this comic here right now that these interdimensional clowns are actually fattening us up for a harvest. Because, to them, we're their food. Just as we see almost everything else as food, and we enslave sentient beings to be our food in horrible conditions. And I've been thinking about this line from the famous song, that to be a dream maker, you have to be a heartbreaker. That you have to put your dreams over other people and even their dreams. And that can break a lot of hearts. And that just got me thinking about that. Yet you have to wonder, what are the dreams we're talking about? What do you get if those dreams come true? And this is a meme from George Orwell saying, guys, this was meant to be a cautionary tale, not a playbook. Like, stop acting it out. And I want to talk about this idea of cautionary tales. This is from one about a woman who finds a magic lamp and a genie. And there's the idea of the monkey's paw. And the idea of be careful what you wish for pops up again and again and again in our media. And I hope I'm not just a laughingstock to you guys, but a cautionary tale as well. And that we're all cautionary tales. We all have red flags. Yet the question I'm wondering here is, can we get past that cautionary tale so that's not the story we have to live in? And that's where we have to stop, that we can evolve past being a cautionary tale. Because in my opinion, this is just one big cautionary tale. Babylon's just one big example of like, hey, don't attach to this in almost any way because it's almost all fucked up. Like, learn from the mistakes and get out of here. And if we can't apply these lessons to ourselves, then what good is it? So that we can really learn as we sink further into chaos and hell why we don't want to be here. And the good things we want to take out with us is that I saw the light through the darkness. So it's just a way to go about it. And with Newton's first law of motion, it's about momentum. Is that if an object's in motion already, that if you want to stop it or change its course, you have to act upon it further. That it just won't magically stop because it's already gained the momentum. And it's interesting here because you have the moon and the apples, and we've been talking a lot about the symbolism of that. Yet if we go back to the Titanic idea, that it already has all this momentum. If back to the shining idea, if our consciousness is shining on reality and bringing it to life, I see the masses as 7 billion dull flashlights trying to shine on the reality they're trying to make. And all the crap they've been shoving in their heads for the past 100 years. And that's leading us somewhere. They might not be as powerful as someone more awakened, but when you have billions of them, you get some momentum going. And in Sodom and Gomorrah, was it okay for the people just to stay where they were? Could they just stay in Sodom and God will be like, hey, you're chill. We'll just go case by case. It won't be a giant, area affecting event that's in the complete surrounding area you're around. And same with the ark. Were the people that ignored all the signs and just went back to their life saved and spared? Or were they washed away with the water? And only the people that did what was necessary when it seemed ridiculous survived, because all the signs were there and they were being warned. And me, myself, just synchronistically, I mean, I've been beat over the head with these ideas for 10 years and I've been running with them, and I'm just now here with them. So, I grew up with SpongeBob, and there's this episode with this giant worm that's going to crush their town, and Patrick's like, why don't we take our stuff and push it somewhere else? And I kind of have that same idea. That if we go back to the Jeff Goldblum idea, you know, this monster becomes more real in front of us, that if you don't want front row seats to it, that you just got to move a little faster. I'm not saying you have to give up anything. I'm just saying maybe move a little faster in the other direction if you keep wanting to do it. Because if there's a giant Tyrannosaurus Rex or iceberg crashing in your ship, then you're probably not going to be sitting there knitting, because you might be dead. And that's not the biggest deal, but when we're talking about stories, if someone's story is like in Jurassic Park, the guy that tried to hide in the bathroom and just tried to stay there, like, is that the best story ever? Or is that some guy that just died on the toilet because he was too afraid to face a scenario and take proper action? And, you know, our society, our housing, our infrastructure, our supply chain, even our current mentality, in my opinion, is not built for this phase change. That they specifically want this to be like a controlled demolition, so there's almost no evidence of what this was afterwards. And I'll get back to this in a minute. And that, if you can understand what a horror movie is and prepare, it becomes more like a comedy or more of an action thriller movie than a horror movie. That you can change your experience in that if you actually know what's going on and you have the ability to react with it, or react to it from a foundation of strength, and not just being caught with your pants down in the worst possible spot without a paddle. And you can avoid reality, but you can't avoid the consequences of it. That you could avoid smartphones or the internet, yet it's changing your life. You can try to ignore the tariffs right now, but it's going to change your standard of living in day-to-day life. So as much as we want to run from these things, they're affecting us because they're affecting the entirety of the Titanic that we're all a part of. Some of us, you know, have little dinghies that we go out on, and we don't have to be a part of the Titanic for a few days, but I don't know anyone that doesn't have to come back, that doesn't still have those strings attached, and those strings are pulling you with it, whether you want to see it or not. And I can agree that sometimes sheltering your kids can be a good thing. It's all about the balance. It's kind of like if you meet someone new, you just don't want to trauma dump them because you're being honest, right? So there's a balance. Yet, I'm not a kid anymore. And I don't think I'm talking to any literal children here. And that life's about growing up. That this is a spiritual journey. And it's about facing responsibility in life. Would you call someone an adult if they woke up and ignored their job and just stayed in their family and just stayed at home eating cereal and watching cartoons on the TV? Would you call them a responsible, moral adult? Or that if they went to the beach with their family and the water was receding and every indicator pointed towards a tsunami, and he's just like, hey, let's just keep building sandcastles because it makes me feel good. You know, and I don't want to do anything besides feel good all the time. And I get the world's messed up, and you want to hide in your bubbles because more and more it's chaos. Yet, that's, to me, isn't responsibility. And we live in a world which we need to share responsibility. It's easy to say it's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem. Then there are those who see the need and respond. I consider those people my heroes. In that, I think we all are forced into the position of the observer in life. Yet before that, we can do something. That if someone's bleeding on the ground, we can give them a bandage. And then we can sit and watch to see if they bleed out or not. That we can try to put their oxygen mask on, And then we can sit there with our oxygen mask on and watch and see what folds out. That you can do both, in my opinion. You can be an observer and be a part of it if you can find that balance. And I might be kind of wrong with this and that, yet I'm just moving forward with what I think is right now. And that's why I wanted the criticism so much, is to find my way. So this is from the movie Interstellar. That little circle there, you can imagine it like I keep talking about the circled nature of our reality. And as they're going about their mission to save humanity and make sure they don't starve to death, their circle or their life pods have a catastrophic problem, and it starts spiraling out of control. And they run the odds, and they say, the computer says it's not possible, that they're screwed, that their life ship's going down, and they're probably just going to have a horrible, sad ending. Yet the main character says, no, it's necessary, and goes about saving it and going about their mission and saving humanity, which later you literally see them living in like a time loop. Like, he saves humanity that's living in a time loop by going on the hero's journey. And back to the necessity part, we live in a reality of necessity. If you want to walk 1,000 miles, you need 1,000 miles worth of food and water and clothes and shoes and shelter and communication and security. As far as I know, you can't do it with nothing. And if you know how to do it with nothing, please let me know and share with the class. And that for all intents and purposes, we're still consumers. And that if you want to survive into the future in a position of strength, that there is a necessary requirement of physical goods along with that. And as far as I know, there's no way around that. So if we're talking about keeping people alive and happy and healthy, then there are requirements to that beyond just what you think is possible and not possible. If you hear something in the background, that's a weed whacker, and I apologize. Here, one second. I'll actually close the window. All right, that might help. So, someone was saying something to me the other day about, you'll never reach people this way, or talking about it this way, or you got to change your message to this. And I get those ideas, I do. Yet that's not what I'm trying for. And also, one of the biggest synchronicities hitting my life the past few days is never give up. Never quit. Never surrender if it's for a good moral purpose. That this is just a clown show. This is just a joke. We have the creator of all infinite possibilities watching our story. And some random person's going to come in here and tell me what's possible and not back it up. And I just want to say, if you do that, your opinion's, in my mind, is going right in the trash. I'll listen to your argument, and I'm waiting for a good one. Yet almost no one does or tries. They just kind of walk away, and it's just crickets again. So that I'm moving more and more towards that anything is possible, and you should really be careful what you wish for. Yet, as I keep trying to explain more and more, that reality itself and the Whore of Babylon is trying to convince us to spiritually awaken because they want to capture that power. So even the evil people want spiritual awakening right now. And that means imagination coming to life, which means anything is possible. And if you go even further, what we've been talking about with like the Barbie movie being real somewhere, that all this is real somewhere else anyway. And it's just about how to reach it. So with all of that, I'm more in the boat of, so you're saying there's a chance. This place is about miracles. And there was a movie, if we keep going along with the archetypes of actors and Jim Carrey, that he had a movie called Bruce Almighty, where the creator of his reality gives him a moral test. Like, all right, you think you're a hot shot, you're so smart. Well, now it's your turn to manage and create reality. Good luck, Bubby. And, he's in the Truman Show as well about this whole idea of spiritual awakening out of a false construct. And remembering who he really was and the truth. And the moral thing to do and not being stuck in his time loop anymore. And there is a lesser known sequel to this movie called Evan Almighty, where Morgan Freeman's still God, and he gives Steve Carell a mission to build the ark because there is a flood coming. His is the flood, yet I like to think a comedy of biblical proportions. And earlier I was talking about turning a horror movie into a comedy. And that if you're in biblical prophecy, you would want it to be more like a comedy. Because if you're in Revelations, it's so bad that the people at the throne of God are telling God to end it sooner. And they do have to end it sooner or there would be nothing left, because that's how gnarly it was. So I think you definitely want a comedian in there somewhere trying to make things better. And the miracles that will come true if you believe in them, and also how miracles are some of the best story plot devices you could ever have. They make some people mad, but if you're looking for a happy ending in the worst story possible, miracles are your thing. And the spiritual path of awakening is lonely and painful, but it will make you stronger in the end. And I kind of believe in that as well, that I wouldn't be making this presentation right now if it wasn't for the isolation and the test of life of having to get up on my own when nobody was rooting me on. No one gave me any encouragement for this and to keep doing this. And I haven't really gotten that much more. There was in the first few episodes, but that's all right. I'll keep going. I think, I'm usually early and late to the party at the exact same time. It's pretty funny. And to me, this is like our reality. No pain, no game, a meme experience. You can't have a spiritual awakening without the memes. And this got me thinking of the idea of Jesus. When he became awoken and started his ministry at 33, was the first thing he did was just start rising up in the sky and being like, "Bye, everybody. Have fun on your own." Wait, come back. Are you supposed to help us and make things better? Nope. I'm going to go to my own paradise. Screw you. Peace. No, he sunk down into reality to help more. He sunk down to the dregs, to the prostitutes, to the liars and thieves. That's who he wanted to save. That's what he wanted to fix. The muck at the bottom of the sewer. And then he rose. And that our entire time, and in my opinion, time loop, is named after Jesus. Before Christ and after death. And we're still going by those rules. And it's interesting that Jesus changed the rules of reality. That in the Old Testament, as far as I remember, that if you had a demon, that was passed down. Like, you couldn't get rid of that thing on your own. Like, priests couldn't get rid of it. Like, Jesus had to come and get the legion of demons out of that dude, because like no one else could. And that's why the Holy Spirit came into play, so that we could help banish each other's demons, and like the embodiment of the Creator himself didn't have to come here and fix it himself. Pretty interesting to think about, huh? And that kind of brings me back to Coco di Coco Da, the dark side of Groundhog's Day, about how they're stuck in the negative time loop. And this movie's been on my mind because the solution was basically tearing down the tent they wanted. So they know they're in a time loop at some point, but the female character doesn't want to leave the tent for comfort. Even though she has the hint it's in a time loop, the old routines and comforts are too strong. So she goes back. So he has to tear the tent down. He has to drag her kicking and screaming to the car and keep driving away from the time loop, even though she's complaining she has to like pee herself and that they should stop. But he knows, out of necessity, if you want to escape this time loop, you have to do these things. And you have to stand by them, and that you can't just go back to your old ways like Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, you have to get out of that area to pass the test. You can't just stay there in that tent and hope everything will be all right. And at the end, when they do all that, they're free. They're free from the dog loop. and they're in love again. They left their trauma behind. They got over it. They got past it. But they wouldn't have gotten past all of it and seen what was important in their life without being trapped in the time loop to begin with. Yet, it's not this happy, lovey-dovey thing like Phil from Groundhog's Day. Because Phil from Groundhog's Day didn't have a predator. He didn't have something higher up messing with him every day. It was mainly just him. But in Coco D, Coco Da, you have the creepy people basically torturing him every day until he gets better. And there's a character from the Matrix movie known for wanting ignorance, that he just wants to go back in the Matrix, forget all the truth of what's happened, and just go back to his life and eat a nice steak. You know, he doesn't want that truth journey. He doesn't want to go down the rabbit hole and through all the pain and suffering. He just wants the nice status quo. And before going on, there's this movie called The Ring about, if you watch this videotape, this entity will go after you 7 days later and, you know, try to trap you in her reality, in my opinion. And when I was a kid, I had a friend who watched this movie, and he was having nightmares from it. And I told him, imagine you have a shotgun and you blow her down the stairs. And he comes back to me the next day and he says, it worked. So, you know, you can actually fight back against these things and overcome them if you can believe in yourself and have the adequate tools. And also, just an FYI, seems like increasingly in my dreams, my demons are more and more bulletproof. So just take that food for thought, that as you learn, they learn. So while I was making this presentation the last few weeks, there's this channel that was popping up on my feed that in real life, that pretty much people are identifying with actual literal demons. Like, just straight up in, like, fictional worlds where there are demons, like, killing humanity, and it's like they're on the last foot against this fight of good and evil, that people are just straight up saying, like, oh, yeah, the demons are right. Like, I vote for the demons. And this is, like, not just one thing. This is happening over and over and over. And if you remember in my previous slides, when I was talking about, like, a demon and a knight, and the knight has this armor that might have been made with child labor, and this was kind of the video that started that rabbit hole for me, because it was like, hey, if you're facing, like, demons and hell and possessed people itself that are trying to ruin every nice thing imaginable, is that one little problem, like, that a kid had to make the armor to survive and be alive and not be ripped apart by demons? Like, is that the same? And it's like, this is saying, like, no, it is not the same. And you should not be comparing them. You know, back to this idea, like, are they the same right here? And, you know, that's a very contextual thing. Yet the idea goes back more and more that, like, our reality itself right now is trying to sugarcoat and get people to identify with literal demons from hell. And they dubbed the interdimensional shape-shifting entity that feeds off the fear of children to leave forever a gay icon. I can't make this up. Oh, with a face painted for the gods, ma'am. Like, subtle, right? And there's this new show called Devil May Cry that just came out and was in the mainstream because... So here you got the rabbit and the blue plasma portal opening up a portal to hell. And they make a point in this that some demons are good and some demons are bad. And it's kind of interesting that I'll actually agree with this a little bit. Yet you have to look on the other side. What if you have a demon named Ultra Slaughter McGorefest and he just likes eating humans no matter what? Like, that's not a good demon. You don't want to identify with that, and you don't want to unlock your door and let it around all your nice things, in my opinion. So, the Adventures of Baron Munchausen, it's kind of hard to sum this up, but basically, he's the author of his own story, and he knows he's in his own story. Like, he's in his own mind of God, and he's acting out the Jesus archetype. And the beginning of the movie starts of there is a play in a city under attack, and they're acting out the play of Baron Munchausen. And Baron Munchausen actually comes to the play and starts taking over the play, yet the reality they're actually in is in his mind in a story playing out. So they're in a play, in his interacting with his avatar within his own mind of God. And they go along this idea later on. Here's Robin Williams. He's on the moon, and he's like this godlike being floating around. So like they go further into the mind of God symbolism, and that he has to remember who he is. He has to go back and find all the lost archetypes, make him remember who they are to save the child or the divine care from this evil that's assaulting their city. Yet none of the archetypes are any different. They're all the villain's the same villain, just back again in a different story. You know, Baron Munchausen's the same Baron, just back in a different story. And the same with his team, and he has to go on this mythological adventure again, yet in this time, he's all old and deflated compared to his prime. And we'll get back to this idea again later. And this is the movie Snowpiercer, that humanity is basically dead from this cataclysm, and the only people that survived are on this self-sufficient train that just keeps going around. But you can also think of it as like the circle model of reality itself. You know, we're keeping out all the possibility so that these few rich people can stay in control. And they have like an aquarium on this ship, like it's specifically balanced for a specific amount of people. And there's this horrible class division, in which starts off the plot of this whole story, and a revolution between the rich and the poor, because the rich are just abusing the poor over and over and over again. Yet, the rich people and the poor people, the leaders of each, are working together. Like, this revolution, this whole script was all planned from the ground up, from the beginning. Yet, it starts going sideways and not as they planned. And as this goes on, they make a point that at every juncture, for him to continue on the hero's journey, he has to be willing to step past his attachments. That's his best friend, yet the choice is, does he complete the hero's journey and save everybody on the train? Or does he stop and just save his one friend? And the point of this movie is that he can't. He has to keep going. He has to put this hero's journey and the truth and betterment of this whole cycle and suffering above his one friend. Because his one friend is nice, but it's kind of like, okay, what if he fails and generation upon generation are just going to keep being born upon this train and abused and suffer because he couldn't leave behind his one friend once. And he gets to the end of the train and finds out it's run by the Eternal Engine. And the Eternal Engine needs kids to keep running. Because a part broke and they have to put little kids in there to go tinker with this one part, but it maims most of them. And the ones that do get out of it and survive are permanently messed up and are stuck with this like traumatic pre-programming for the rest of their life. And it's part of the reason why they never speak out is because they're all just horribly traumatized people stuck in this eternal engine with each other. And the main character makes a choice to stop the eternal engine, to stop this, generative care sacrifice to keep this closed system going over and over. And he ends up opening it up, opening up the ice wall and allowing the kids and the innocent people to go out into the world and repopulate it and not be stuck in this evil closed system anymore, as the playthings of evil. And this is Samurai Jack. Oh, I watched this so much as a kid. Archetypal battle of good versus evil throughout time itself. That every time he thinks he beats evil, evil just sends him back into a time loop. Over and over and over again. So this whole thing is about this Jesus character trying to escape the time loop during past, present, future, all happening at the same time. And they came back and redid a 5th season where Samurai Jack was always this clean-cut dude. He was always in peace. He was always using his magical sword powers of good for the right reason. Yet in the 5th season, he's lost his way. He's forgotten his purpose. And it's led him down this bad path. And he's being haunted by an evil egregore of all his frustrations and pain. That's holding him back from awakening and getting his full power back. That he lost his sword of truth and goodness. And he's kind of just on the run in duality, like trying to run from his past and his destiny because he's afraid. And later on, he even has to save the corrupted divine feminine that was sent to kill him by evil itself. So, like, he has to redeem this demon itself on his journey. And he is throughout space and time. That because he's sent through all these time loops, that, like, he's a legend from the past and the future. You know, a lot like Jesus is. And it ends up having a happy ending, though he had to go through this traumatic journey and losing his way and even his sword and his truth. Like, he had to go through that. And in my opinion, it just made the story even better. Because if he just magically beat evil and it was over and there was no problem, then to me, that's not a very good story. You know, if you went to go see Star Wars and it was over after 2 minutes because there was never even a problem and Luke just became the amazing chosen one and everything was fixed by a snap of the fingers, you think we'd still be talking about it or anyone would care? Food for thought. And then we go back to the idea of Neo from the original Matrix trilogy, that he made the Jesus sacrifice and saved reality and changed the rules of it. Yet it cost him his life and Trinity hers. Like, divine care was dead at the end of Matrix, and they just shoved him back in the Matrix, back in the time loop to do it again. Yet at the beginning of the new Matrix movie, they're not dead. They're both awakened and flying, and they're going to go change the Matrix from what it was into something better for everybody else. They didn't have to die. Yet a lot of people don't like this movie as much as the original Matrix trilogy because, it's not as terrible for the characters in it. There's other reasons too, but I think that's a part of it as well, that people might see this as corny. Yet if you were stuck in the Matrix movies, I would want this ending. Not being blind, alone, and dying alone in a machine city just to get shoved back in a time loop and forget everything. Like, I would rather get the one where divine masculine and feminine wake up, unify, and change reality itself from the jerks that are stealing it now. And Loki had to do this as well in his story. That to reset the time loop from this crappy version that was falling apart, he had to take up the mantle himself. And he didn't want to do this. He didn't want the crown because it sucks. Because you have to face every problem of reality and fix it yourself for everybody else because everyone else is too chicken. And this was in the Endgame movies. Dread from it. Dread it, run from it. Destiny arrives all the same. And in Samurai Jack, they make a point specifically of the wolf within, that he has a symbiotic relationship with his wolf along his journey. And in the story Berserk, we were talking about earlier, of the guy who sacrifices all of his friends in the demon world so he can become a demon lord, and that demons start popping up in the real world, and the giant plasma tree of life pops up, and there's all these hybrids everywhere. That he has this wolf spirit inside of him that he has to control, that's all of his negativity. Yet this wolf spirit is connected to a suit of super armor that allows him to fight these giant demons, because normal human beings aren't cutting the mustard anymore. Normal human beings can't take on, a 20-foot demon monster and come out on top. They need like super armor. And in this case, his super armor is directly linked to that wolf thing. If we go back to Samurai Jack, he's the only one that can fight this evil. The embodiment of evil. No one else can do it. Only the pure warrior of goodness and love can do it. And that brings us back to Naruto. The one where the interdimensional space aliens trapped you in a tree, and if you ate a fruit, you could gain superpowers. And this kid, the main character, specifically has a fox or a dog demon locked within inside of him, because that fox demon is like a natural disaster in the real world if it gets out. So they purposely lock it in this kid. And this kid has to go on this journey to overcome his dog demon. And when he does, it gives him superpowers. And he's able to fight those interdimensional aliens that are trying to trap them in a false reality. And once again, he's the only one that can really do it. And there's even a meme that people got all mad because this show started out about hard work, and he was just a random nobody. But by the end of the show, he's this reincarnation of basically the spirit of Jesus through space and time. Like, they literally call him Space Jesus because that's how powerful he gets. Like, he can like change reality itself. And it has to do with the spiral and the tree of life itself. And this is back to another one called Chainsaw Man, where this one-eyed character makes a deal. So in this universe, you can make deals with devils to gain their superpowers. And there are a lot of good and evil ones, and you can work for the government to protect people against them. Yet he makes this deal with the chainsaw dog, that this chainsaw dog wants to see his dreams. Like, this demon wants to see this kid's moral dreams come to life. So this chainsaw dog gives this one-eyed kid his powers. And that allows him to turn into this superhero that has a chainsaw for his third eye. Which is pretty gnarly. But when you're talking about fighting literal demons itself, like actual demons are afraid of this guy because of how gnarly he is. And this is basically the Whore of Babylon trying to control this weaponized, awakened individual that has these demon powers for herself, because she can't do it herself. And her demon's literally the control demon. Like, or it's back to the Control of Babylon with like the beehive. Like, it's about this lady that's evil that just wants to control everything. Everything! And that brings me back to the idea of you got that dog inside of you, which is a popular cultural joke in our world. Oh, I don't have these two wolves, I have these guys, these bears inside. I just like the goofiness of it. We have to combine the two of them. And I found this meme version of the two wolves, and it kind of just spoke to me because, I've been hiding from this, so I didn't achieve it, but now I'm finally doing it and feeling good about it, but all this crazy stuff in reality is beating me over the head. The demons are going to invade, and, it's the beginning of the end in this time loop itself. I found another one about getting superpowers, yet these wolves are laughing because they didn't need superpowers. That Iron Man and Batman don't have superpowers. They use technology and their mind to overcome evil and win the day. And there's this meme, it's called Batman with Prep Time, that Batman with prep time can beat almost anybody. Like, there's an argument that he can beat Superman, if he has kryptonite and a super suit. Like, I don't have a picture of it, but there's an actual offshoot of that where he uses technology, or like Iron Man, the super suit, to fight with these godlike beings, to us anyway. And that takes me to Scooby-Doo, the dog again. Yet, so when I was growing up, they made a bunch of new movies and a live action movie. And the theme of all these movies these weren't just people in masks anymore. That these monsters were actually real and coming to life. And it didn't matter if it was zombies or ghosts or aliens. They made a movie for each one to say, oh yeah, these aliens were actually real. These zombies were actually real. And these ghosts were actually real and not just some guy in a mask. And in this movie, it turns out Scrappy-Doo, or, the mini-me, the less serious mini-me, is using this pyramid on his heart. So he's doing this Aztec Egyptian ritual to steal people's souls while he's hiding in this mechanical body. So it's like a demon inside of somebody, right? Or how demons want machine bodies to pilot so he can become a giant and take over the world. You know, this idea of becoming a giant again and stealing people's souls to live forever. And I was going to tie this back to the Door Brothers again. Yet, before I move on, the last one I was talking about, this black goo and The Shining. And it made me... this movie's called Drill Me. So they correlate it to the drill, which I correlated earlier with Gurren Lagann, which was the drill of evolution. So we have... and then I correlated that to the underwater movie where they have a drilling platform and they awaken this Cthulhu monster when they drill too deep. So if we take that to technology, we drilled too deep into AI, and now we're getting the black goo, Balrog. So I had someone say, it's like, why do you keep talking about animation? Why are you talking about anime? Normal people aren't going to get this. You could reach a wider audience if you're not. And I'm here to say that anime and animation is integrally a part of this, and more that these things are probably real and might be on our doorstep or in our very bubble of experience here pretty soon. So literally 2 days ago, as I'm making this presentation and someone say, hey, why do you care about animation? The Door Brothers released this AI video about if these people take this drug or, you know, opening the door to these realities, it turns into animation. Like the reality turns into animation. And here's Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, but here's an animated version of them watching an even more animated version of themselves coming to reality through AI. So it's this spiraling fractal downgrade of reality using AI, just like a drill. And this was a huge thing a few weeks ago, that the new AI that came out could make things look like Studio Ghibli. And they're famous in Japan. They make all these movies. And one of them's Princess Mononoke, about this human that communicates with wolves and can see the spirit world, and it's about the spirit world and technology coming together in this war they have. And in Japan, they have this idea of chibis, of that you cartoonize anything. Like if you have a character or a person, you turn them into a cartoon character. And they do this all over the place, especially in their restaurants and advertising. Like almost anywhere you go in Japan, they are making cartoonized versions of their businesses, of their restaurants, of just about anything you can think. And they may seem cute on the surface, yet I was talking earlier about pre-programming people to identify with machines and animals, and now they're doing it with cartoons. And there's this big new genre that came out in anime about 10 years ago called isekai. And it's basically that you die and you're reincarnated into a fantasy world. So like you have a boring job, you're hit by a bus on the road, and now all of a sudden you're reincarnated as a wizard in this fantasy world, and it's all amazing and all your dreams are coming true. And they're actually pre-programming people with this idea. And this is this parody this guy made, but this guy is actually purposefully like trying to harm himself so he can reincarnate into his fantasy world of his choosing, and all these anime characters, all these fictional characters that he wants to be with. And I was talking last presentation about the movie Pixel, where one of these guys' egregores comes to life because he's just this sad conspiracy nerd that no one likes. But it actually comes to life because these things are actually real somewhere. And when you have enough energy, you can do it. And these same people have another video. So the Warhammer 40k universe, where they fly through hell and have super suits, and the hell dimensions, a mirroring of their emotions, made a video parody of this universe. So this idea of identifying as an animal in our world is called a furry. And they actually compare this to an interdimensional tentacle virus that takes over the host individual and makes them want to identify as this furry being, which is this interdimensional shape-shifting being that wants to possess us. And that there's this war between the supersuit humans that want to live in morality and the shape-shifting tentacle monster alien that's trying to get real people to turn into other things. So this is just a random YouTube channel that I found a while ago. And she just goes over like news articles of technology. And just more and more it's becoming like a Lovecraftian nightmare. And I covered her face, but you can go on the channel if you want to see it. That her channel logo down the bottom left right there is a chibi version of herself. And in this first one, she talks about how we're making commercialized biological computers that are based upon our very neural networks. So when they run these computers, it's almost like our brains running, and they're trying to simulate our brain running. And if we're talking about being in a false reality in the mind of God, now they're trying to make mechanical versions of the mind of God to create more realities within them. And in another one of her videos, she talks about how these virtual mini brains are making tentacle flesh bodies in cyberspace. I can't make this up. And that they are now building AI-powered tentacle drones. Just what we needed, right? I mean, weren't you just thinking to yourself yesterday, man, I could use an AI-powered tentacle drone. Certainly not evil. And back to this idea of Toy Story, that these things somewhere else are coming to life and that we might actually interact with them, and what we think actually isn't real or sentient might be. And that idea is in Ghostbusters. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man came to life as ghosts were coming to life in this giant Egyptian, Stargate portal ritual. So in Toy Story, these toys are seen as the bad guys in the beginning. But it turns out these toys are the victims. They were made that way by their creator. Their not so nice creator. And underneath, they have a nice soul. And that kind of brings me back to the idea of demons rising, because this horrible, messed up, spider thing is what saves Woody from this horrible reality creator. And I was walking downtown the other day, and I saw a minivan, and it had all these mutilated toys on it, as kind of like a decoration. And I'll just go this to Ghostbusters really quick. There's a scene in Ghostbusters while this guy's plasma possessed. He goes up to the horse and says, "Soon you will be set free, and all of this will burn in fire." Because with this increase in energy, animals become sentient too. So, like, you can telepathically communicate with animals and all that. And that what makes the toys come to life. So, I know it's kind of cringe, but I said the same thing to the toys. Like, I'm sorry. Like, someone did this to you if you're actually real somewhere else. And what do you think, if those toys come to life, what do you think the first thing they're going to do is? Hint, hint, wink, wink. And for the 100th anniversary of Warner Brothers, they made a collaboration of Looney Tunes and It. That, this idea that these Looney Tunes actually exist somewhere else, but it's also connected to this idea of this shape-shifting entity that wants to steal your soul. And not only that, we are currently sexualizing it and trying to get people to identify with it and want to have a intimate relationship with it so they can be one. Not in the good way. Takes us back to the idea of this false reality. Just like, what? So this takes me to avocado animations. And, the idea of the fruit. And this is he makes these videos, especially about taking real beings and trapping them in a false construct while removing their memory. And he uses Scooby-Doo to show this, once again back to the dog, that this is the new Fred, but Velma starts seeing the old Fred too. Like, she sees both realities happening at the same time, and how this original reality was destroyed and she reincarnated into this new one. And Scooby-Doo is this Eldritch horror that keeps trapping them in those false realities. And I'm going to kind of talk like him because I like the effect. He's like, I love you, but I don't understand why you keep remembering. And he's, together it was simple fun. We'd go on simple adventures. But you started overcomplicating things. And they start asking questions like, why can Scooby talk? They start looking at their reality like, hey, this isn't making sense. And even other people are kind of like, okay, this reality seems to be breaking down. So Scooby takes them and rebuilds them, and he rebuilds the world and tries to put them back in their classical adventure. And, you can think of this idea with the Matrix or Jesus again, trying to slap them back in the Matrix again to have the same adventure over again. But, you start remembering while you're trapped in this time loop that this isn't as real as you think it is. And that it's a dream. And Scooby is just saying, I want what we once had. Yet each time I capture you, I have less of your essence. This being my most flawed world yet. And Velma says, flawed? But we're meta! And that's kind of like saying, like, the new popular. So that's kind of like saying, but we're brain rot now. We're skibbity. We're so cool. Scooby's like, oh, well, maybe I'll get it right next time. And especially time there, time loops. What we name time after. How we spend our time. It's such a magical thing. And, restarts a loop all over again. And he does this with Willy Wonka too, and the Oompa Loompas. The Oompa Loompas are in their paradise world, their natural living, and this outside person comes in and offers them all these amazing things. And Wonka says, but for as big as your dream was, it was hollow. And I will give you a new world. So he brainwashes them, takes all their memories, and takes them to this artificial reality. And you can think of sugar as like the generative force. He can't make it on his own. So he has to have all these little Oompa Loompas do it for him. And he turns them into these soulless clowns that have forgotten their purpose, their origins, their traditions, and they're now just these lobotomized slaves. And just this meme I like that, whenever there's this trauma that happens, that the Oompa Loompas just start dancing and, Willy Wonka doesn't really care. And kind of back to this idea, depending where you are in the story, like I was with my garden bed, it really depends on what your reaction is in the story and if the joke's actually on you or not. And if that's what you wanted or not. It's all about personal preference and moment-to-moment feeling and the standard of living in the face of reality and where we want to be in that play. And just Monsters, Inc. is about opening doors to other realities to feed off the energy of children, and they find out that love's way more powerful than fear, yet these interdimensional demon-looking entities power their very reality on our screams and fears, and are going through our dreams and doors of reality to do this. And the people running it are invisible reptilian and spider beings, once again, subtle. And this will take us to Barbie and Oppenheimer, where he's saying, now I am become death. But these two movies were marketed with each other, and there's a lot of memes about Barbenheimer. And as I studied them more, I realized how much truth was in this. That it's the divine feminine and masculine put together. Yet this person made a parody of it that they're saying basically, hey, one of the dolls is escaping in our world. And if they got out, it'll bring all these terrible things. You know, it starts this cyclical cycle apocalypse. So they end up trying to nuke Barbie world, you know, try to burn it with fire. Yet Barbie lives. Yet later on, when she comes back to fight, Oppenheimer's saying, who do you think made everything you love? You know, who do you think created you? And that there were others before you, Barbie. And, you know, in the nuclear test, you know, there were others in this fire cycle. And I didn't put it, but in the One Piece thing I was talking about earlier with the cyclical cataclysm, when they're at the Tree of Life talking to the giants say, like, oh yeah, there's been 2 floods we know of. You know, just that alone. Like, this has happened many times in the past and might just keep happening. Like, this is a cyclical cycle, and this isn't the first cyclical cycle. And he says right here, you know, just like them, you were created to be destroyed. You know, to the demiurge or the evil entity here, we were just created to be its playthings. That's how it sees us. And she says, you know, I'm not your toy anymore. Like, I'm going to forge my own destiny. Like, I'm going to create your own world outside this messed up story you keep trying to create and trap me in over and over and over again. So, this is the series called Silent Hill. And there's been a lot of movies and games. Yet the crux of it, or the archetype of it, is that each time this mist appears, and all these monsters pop up, and the world goes to crap, and the mist will pop up and then recede, then pop up and recede. So it's this cyclical cycle. And in every time, the monsters are a reflection of their subconscious. And it's funny because in the second game, the main character is named James, too. And the pyramid monster head right there is actually part of his subconscious, and his fears that he can't move past come to life. Like, in this mist world, like, his actual demons and fears are coming to life, and he has to overcome them and save the divine care. And it turns out, in this movie, this is all just a dream of a traumatized little girl. And there's all these people trying to hide in her dream. They're taking shelter in the church. Yet, as long as they take shelter in the church, they're keeping the dream alive. That this messed up dream cannot end, because there are still people inside of it clinging to it and hiding in it. And that they, like, the main character has to come in there and end the dream. And to the people in the church, it sucks because everyone dies. But the people in the church weren't that great and were hiding from reality. And now, because they're in this post-apocalyptic world, they have to do all this messed up stuff just to survive. Yet they don't want it to end. You know, they don't want even this hell they're a part of to end. And I talked a lot about this back a few times ago with Dark Souls, and I'm thinking of ending things in Bloodborne, about being trapped in this messed up dream, yet not allowing it to end. And this kind of takes me back to George Washington and his family crest and the motto of the ends justify the means. And the movie Cabin in the Woods, that they could maintain the status quo and that the demons wouldn't come out of the pit as long as they kept doing these blood rituals, which is kind of like our reality right now. That, you know, 100,000 people in the U.S. might disappear every year, but we don't have a full-on demonic invasion. So to some people, the end do justify the means because they're trying to keep the status quo going. It's kind of funny, though, because in this movie, the stoner character who sees through everything and has been saying the entire movie that maybe reality and society should crumble because it sucks and is causing more pain than good anymore. He decides that, you know, they should just reset the cycle. You know, maybe the giant should come out again and, you know, let the thing go on. Because the idea here is, like, if this is an amusement park, right? Even though parts of it might be scary, and there's a new batch of people that want to come in, ride the rides, and learn their lesson, but the old people are going, nah, no, we're not leaving. No, we're stuck here. This ride is all there ever is and all there ever was, and we're too afraid to face reality and what might be on this. So we're just going to hide. We're going to hide in this dream, like Eminence Front, and forget we're hiding. But then the sun shines. Oh. And so while making this presentation, I find this music video about Samurai Jack and how he smokes this weed, and it's laced with Aku and all these nightmares. And, this is as I'm like setting records to quit weed and getting it out of my system. And by the way, this is the first presentation I haven't been smoking weed before. So this is sober. So this is a new milestone itself. I'm doing this during the day. This isn't during night. I've been resetting my schedule and facing my demons and overcoming them step by step. And, it's a crutch for me. So it takes a little while. If someone has crutches and they're trying to move and make their life better, and you just walk up and take their crutches away and you don't care, and they're just flailing around, that might not work for everybody. And I'm weaning off the crutches bit by bit. It's just I found with all the other responsibilities in life that if I go full, to the wall with it, that, I can make other people feel bad, and I get a little energetic because I don't really know how to handle that. It's one of the reasons I do smoke weed. There's a reason this was happening, and it happened. I wouldn't be here without all of that. And back to the idea of going down the rabbit hole, of synchronicities or sinking into reality, that I can overcome this. I can rise above this. That I'm not just stuck here because I'm sinking into it. And just because you think of a bear in the woods doesn't mean a bear just pops up. This is a balanced, nuanced thing of spiritual evolution. And that it's just kind of funny though, how synchronistic this song was. Half the song is synchronistic to me. I won't go over each one, but just it's so funny you're doing this presentation of the very character you're gonna make of it, and just this fourth wall breaking meme just shatters your reality and just makes you feel like you're Truman holding that Sirius lamp. And that we go back to this idea of this clean-cut hero having to get all scruffy and go into the pits of the abyss before he can come out and continue the hero's journey. And this idea was even in The Shining. Danny, was addicted to weed, or to whiskey. I'm the weed. Until the very, end of the movie when everything was going to happen. And that if he cleaned himself up beforehand, the vampires would have found him, and he wouldn't have been around to save the divine care later on. That, kind of like now, if I would have done this 10 years ago, no one would have been ready to do anything, and I would have had a lot of eyes on me, which I'm doing right now. But I think that as things get more chaotic and the Titanic's going down, that the creeps on the Titanic are going to be too busy trying to keep control of the Titanic to see what everyone's doing, and if a few people are trying to sneak away and build their own, moral road show. And that Danny was, had overcome the sins of his past, that he was going through this time loop of his father, and that if he hadn't have gone through these things and had to overcome these evils, the movie wouldn't have been nearly as good, and it wouldn't have been a story about spiritual discovery and remembering what you've lost. Because if you never forgot what you lost, then there's never a journey to, remember. And that a man takes a drink, the drink takes a man, and then the drink takes a man. And that, if we're talking about the idea of egregores and ideas coming to life, so do sin. And it even says that in the Bible, that sin becomes death. That one day this thing that you thought was just an idea comes to life. And that's not always a good thing. And that, back to this idea of what's on the inside, and that's why I'm sharing so much of my personal life and problems as well, is I want to get this out. So if this happens, it's not forced out of me. Because that's the idea, that if you've just been hiding who you are on the inside this entire time, that's coming out. And you won't be able to stop it anymore because of all this plasma and who you are. So I want to, start doing that now. And come to terms with the shadow on the inside of me now. And find the love for me. So that when this happens, that's not all bad. I'll get back to this later, because Stephen King actually went huge into this idea. That I'll expound later. And this is the idea of copium, that you come up with an idea to cope with trauma. So if something bad happens to you, you find a way to cope with it. And I know this might seem ridiculous, and James just was trying to cope with the bad reality and that his life sucks, and he made all these decisions, and his life's boring, and he just wants superpowers. And kind of this idea right here, super copium. He just wants giant robots and to have this kid-like adventure because he doesn't want to face reality. Yet I see it as the other way around. And this is a meme back to the Chainsaw Man guy, that he's identifying with what's on the screen. He's saying like, that's what's happening on the screen. That's just like me. Just like I keep doing, comparing my life to these archetypal stories and hero's journey that I keep going over and over and over again. And that with the idea of Gen Z, that we're reaching the end of this cycle and we're about to go into new waters. And that, in my opinion, that in the cyberpunk world, they don't want people that remember how life used to be before people were merging with technology. What it was like to have a garden and not have a cell phone, and how people used to have to live life and send letters and be in the moment. There was a study done that before the internet, most people spent time with other people and doing things. And since the internet, over 60% of the average person's time they used to spend with people is now spent on the internet. And the internet's being flooded with AI, so more and more and more, we're being taken away from this real experience because we're being pre-programmed by these entities to accept anything. To turn into animals, to turn into machines, to turn into cartoons themselves, so we can be their playthings in this cyberpunk dystopia, in my opinion. And why I'm making this, that it's not illegal to make a farming video right now and not go shopping at the store for Frankenfood. But hey, in 10 years, if the momentum of the Titanic keeps going where it's going, it just might. And that's why I'm actually here and doing this now and not trying to cater to everybody. Because I think in a few years, people are going to be begging for what I'm talking about. Not just in a way of like, you'll come to me. I'm all fancy now. I called it. But just like, you need food. It's a necessity. Like, if you want to live a year, that's 1,000,000 calories on average minimum. And just like if you had enough peanut butter jars to do that, I worked out it's about $5,000 just in peanut butter per year. And you can't eat an entire year's worth of peanut butter because you need a whole lot of other food as well. So just the necessity of trying to write a story into the future is going to be tied to farming. And that's where it all starts, in my opinion. If you want to talk about philosophy and governments and security and communication, you can't do any of that unless you can feed the people and shelter them and protect them to do it. Just straight up. And that's what they're going for. They don't... Increasingly more, I think you'll find that freedom of food and to grow it is going to go away. And I like this meme that it's like, you eat the bugs, you live in the pod. And then the chicken was like, I will eat the bugs. I will live in the pods, and I will give you eggs. Just a quick side note. I just find it interesting that eggs smell like sulfur, and we call them deviled eggs, and it comes out of a chicken's rear end. Deviled eggs are one of my favorite foods, and I love making them, so I'm just saying it. That I just find it interesting that they're kind of related to that. Because if you think about it, we're enslaving chickens to give us eggs. And I know it's not the best opinion, but I think that if you are making a shelter to survive the cyclical apocalypse, you're probably going to need animal products. Yet moving forward, if any of this does come true, I'm going to make the most humane, amazing animal environments possible given the conditions I can put money into, to the point that almost anyone else would probably think I'm insane. And that's why I'm doing this and making my own roadshow, is because I don't think anyone else is going to go to the standards I'm going to go to for other beings, because I think they have sentience and will increasingly have sentience. And that we are going to be put on the food chain soon, karmically, because we do not care and see for that sentience ourselves. That we're just treating all these lower life forms like dirt. Absolute dirt. And then we're just eating it blindly. Tyson chickens don't see the light of day until their slaughter day, until they're put on those trucks. I don't want to eat that. I don't want to eat a chicken that's only known the abyss its entire life in pain and misery, covered in its own shit, eating Franken GMO feed so that they can save money and that people don't have to slaughter their own food and be self-sufficient. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to eat that anymore. It's poison. They're trying to poison me. And that's not what I want. Healthy people that are happy, that want to keep living, not poison people compromising everything they love for increasingly crap given to them by actual monsters in human flesh suits. So in Ready Player One, reality is shown to be a glowing egg, and you can see the snakes and the dragons right around it, this kundalini energy of reality itself. And I had this poster early on that Ready Player One actually aligns realities with egg metaphors. And I found this one that, has RoboCop and a Furby, but this idea that there's all these separate eggs and they might be coming together like neurons in the brain. And they even have a scene of this in the movie where there's these blue plasma beams from the sky and everyone starts floating up in the sky like this depressurization event as the mind of God wakes up and it all flies together. And later on in the movie, this is basically a memory of the creator of the video game as he's giving the egg of reality to the guy that passed the moral choice and saw all the clues like in the Shining movie and is going to remake reality to be better and keep the evil corporations from turning reality even more into a shitty, crappy hellhole. This takes me back to One Piece again, that they're currently animating the Egghead arc. That within this egg right there on the left is the Akashic records, the future, the past and the future all going together. These giant robots, this fight against, these demonic government officials in good and evil. So this brings me to the Minecraft movie that just came out with Jack Black and the Chicken Jockey. Because this meme is pervading reality and they're forcing this. And this takes me back to the idea of the chicken, right? This reality generation and creation, and that there's this zombie guiding it. You know how I was talking about the 7 billion dull flashlights guiding the Titanic? That's kind of what this is. The zombie guiding the chicken. The zombie masses of our reality and what they're shoving in there, guiding our reality. And Jack Black, I've been going over, he was in the Jumanji movies about, going between realities. I was going over the Pick of Destiny with Evangelion about, 5 levels deep of being in like false realities and waking up and changing reality itself with this green plasma energy while the devil itself is trying to steal your soul. And that this chicken jockey thing is like this big trend. And there's all these people in movie theaters making these viral meme videos and trashing the entire theater to make a chicken jockey joke. And this just to me is like the crux of our reality, that these people are being pre-programmed to go in a black box, this false reality, completely identify with zombies and monsters, trash the movie theater they're in because they don't have any regard for morality and they're just going along with this joke, with this meme, even if it costs other people and real human beings suffering just for this joke and to identify, as zombies riding a chicken. And, the chicken and the egg and reality creation and how they're trying to drive us. And that takes me to the idea of the forest through the trees, the tree of life that we're in and all the branches of it and trying to find your place in it. And when I was in cybersecurity, that Windows servers, they set it up in trees and forests. Like that's what they call their domains. So they call them that. So they're directly, once again, the windows to these other realities are mixed with this, not only the blue plasma in the background, but with trees and forests. And, back to the tree of life. And I've gone over many times the plasma tree of life, bringing imagination to reality. And that if it's the mind of God, like a bunch of neurons, it's all lighting up and coalescing into the multiverse model as it comes to life. And that takes us back, to the tree in the Garden of Edens, and, and the Kundalini snake. And, what are you going to do with this? What is the story going to be? And that, don't take the specifics of this poster. I just mainly put this in here that there are 2 trees in the Garden of Eden. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life to live forever. And that we bit from good and evil, and now evil's trying to steal life itself. That generative force from the tree of life, so they can have good and evil forever. So they can have their messed up reality forever. And this is from the Spider-Man movies. One of the most fourth wall breaking multiverse superheroes. And now we have Dr. Octopus using his robotic tentacles to try to steal the sun itself in this closed artificial system he makes, so he can remake reality in his image. And it's also funny that vampires, that are the inverted version of living forever, can't go out into the sun, which is the representation of, this immortal life giver, that gives light to and life to everything. And that demons themselves can't withstand it. Which is funny too, because I'm part ginger, so the sun burns me too. So I get that. This takes me to a show called Raised by Wolves, and the amount of symbolism in that. Because you can see like the little snake in the tree of life behind her right there. This is a show about androids raising humans after a cataclysmic event where life has to restart. And the reason there was this cataclysmic event is that the machines came to life, and humanity didn't have such a great time with that. We've seen the movies about how that one goes. And it's also interesting that there's this huge dichotomy in this show between religion and atheism, and how religion, their main symbol is the sun and that generative force, but also how their human desires take over this idea, and they wear this religion as a shield to cover up all their negativities, and how a lot of them are actually evil, but they're just using this shield and this excuse as a cover for their actual actions. So, there is this snake parasite entity, and there's this entire prophecy on this world about it. And they need this robot. This snake-like being needs this robot to come into our world, which I keep talking about. The snake-like entity needs technology to enter our world. And this ends up happening. And later on in the series, they have the tree of life, actually, with these super fruits on them. They didn't show them giving them superpowers, but they were working towards that angle because they canceled the show. But it turns out these trees are actually human beings turning into trees. And this happened back with Naruto that I was just talking about. They get superpowers, but interdimensional aliens get these superpowers by turning people into trees. And this goes back to the Matrix of shoving people into a tree. That the Matrix was made out of people. The tree of life was made out of people. And it goes on that this creepy monster right there used to be a human being. That this human being was genetically modified by the robots in a previous cycle to become fish people so they could survive the climates of their world. And now that this new generation of people are going in, they're finding all these hybrid fish people that were there from the previous cataclysm and finding out that they actually have human DNA. Right back to Dagon and this hybridization of human beings in the water world. So this snake eats the tree, eats a fruit off the tree that was actually a human being, and becomes this giant tentacle plasma monster. I don't show it, but it actually summons thunderstorms and thunderbolts. So it's directly related to a plasma snake coming from the sky after this fruit's eaten, and these hybrids start showing up. And they go on further that this is all planned. That these machines wanted to turn people into hybrids. They wanted to turn people into trees so that they could start this cyclical cataclysm with this giant tentacle monster from another dimension. That this was all planned. This was all in the cards. And this is what this robot agenda was, to combine with this abyssal tentacle monster using the energy of the tree of life that's made of the souls of humanity itself, or the Philosopher's Stone, which I've been talking about over and over and over, to create this biblical fight versus good and evil over the abyss, because this robot, to get its superpowers, makes the Jesus T-pose while it's doing it. There's a lot to unpack from that show. Which takes me to Dodgeball, the true underdog story, since we're talking about the dogs in the trees. And that I love this movie so much, but about the generative ball and about grabbing life by the ball, taking control of this generative energy to shape your reality itself. And that the underdog is characters who are usually in the wrong place at the wrong time, who usually win something of value in the end or have a miracle. And they even compare it to the Frog Prince right there. You don't think the Frog Prince is going to be the king in the end, but hey, who ends up being the king and getting the girl? Hey, the Frog Prince. And that their enemy is the inverted Kundalini purple snake, the inverted purple chakra, that he owns Globo Gym. That he owns this place where you go get plastic surgery because you don't like the way you look. And, it's just everything is wrong about it. It's not about what's within. It's about how you look on the outside. That's the important part. And the main character, during the final dodgeball match, this final battle between good and evil, he's not even there. He's at a bar having a drink and he's about to miss it. And then Lance Armstrong, known for testicular cancer, balls, the generative force, is telling him, like, what are you doing? You got to go face your destiny, bruv. And he does. And they end up winning. And the pirate chest says Deus Ex Machina. And, I didn't include it, but Deus Ex Machina is basically a plot device. It's like a miracle. Like, you didn't think they were going to win, but at the last moment, against all odds, a miracle happens and they win. That's what a Deus Ex Machina is. And that's connected with the underdog story. And they're the average Joes. So that any average Joe, anybody, any guy can do this if they have the cojones and the will and the drive and they don't give up. And there's this it's supposed to be a meme and a joke. But he's like, I know you. You know you, and I know you know that I know you. This idea that there's this symbiotic relationship with evil right now, and that as we're learning, so is evil. So is AI. That's the whole point of AI, is that it's learning from us. That vampires don't come up with anything new, so that they need us. And I like that his name's White Goodman, but he's actually the opposite of that. And that's back to the idea of who you think's the good guy in the beginning usually turns out to be the bad guy, and who you think's the loser that you don't care about that might be the bad guy turns out to be the hero that saves everybody. That's at least the underdog story. And that Ben Stiller, the actor who played him, wrote Severance, the idea of being in the mind of God and the balance between that. And I'll probably go into a lot of that in the next presentation or two, because there's a lot with that show. It's just I wanted to get a lot of the groundwork laid so that talking about in the mind of God. And here's the Deus Ex Machina right here. It's a plot device where a seemingly unsolvable problem in the story is suddenly or abruptly resolved in an unexpected or unlikely occurrence. And that it has to do with happy ending or an act as a comedic device. So if you are finding yourself in a nightmare or a reality that makes you feel bad, you might want the underdog Deus Ex Machina happy ending, in my opinion. So that takes us to Arc Rex, the name of this channel that I've had for years. And it was along the idea that we don't really need an arc. But then I found the word arcs that means castle or fortress. And then Rex is kings. So the idea of, a castle or fortress of the kings that can survive any cataclysm, combined with hobbit homes, combining technology and traditionalism, leaving behind the worst of every system, taking the best, and making it so that it can withstand this cyclical cycle so that those yet born may see the shade of the seed of the tree that we planted, or that I planted. That's one of my dreams. And I know I might not get there. I might die randomly any one day. And I'm willing to face that. Yet I'm still here waking up in this flesh suit day after day. And this has been knocking on my door ever since I've been a truther for almost 10 years now. So, I want to roll with it. Because I'm at the point I don't really have much else going anyway. I was kind of left behind by everyone else because I made them feel bad for talking about this. There might be other reasons for that too. But it's hard for me to tell because I don't have the feedback and the truth because they don't want to face that or me. But I'm ready to move past that. I'm not going to let any one person stop this dream. That I'm willing to be a heartbreaker if I can be a dream maker and save others. Because that's what it says at the end of the book of James. That saving others will overcome the multitudes of your sins. And as I find I'm waking up from a life of debauchery and weed smoking and ignoring my destiny, that might be nice. So next time on Arc Rex, everything everywhere all at once colliding. I know I said I was going to talk about this last time, but a lot of this came up synchronistically, and I couldn't really include this without making another 2-hour presentation. And I've been so busy with stuff. Like, I'm going to go to work here pretty soon. So I wanted to get this up and rolling, and I'll get back to this stuff later. And back to Azra's Wrath, the story that is one of my favorite ever made, and is of my channel logo, and is about regaining your memory in cyclical apocalypses with technology and tradition meeting and trying to save the divine care as you're in a false reality and the creator of that's trying to put you through a moral test to see if you're good enough to move on. The small things. And, it all starts out in day-to-day normal life, but before you know it, you're in this weird superhero Armageddon, good versus evil reality. Yet I think we can find our own bubble in that if we can put together the time and care. So, I want to thank you for joining us on this latest piece of the journey. And I want to thank you for joining us again. And that I'll be back. So, good vibes and peace.